Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel Easy Programming. I'm Naveen Mishra and I'll teach you how to write programs in C and C++ language. In my previous videos, I have discussed C language as well as some initial topics of C++ language. In my previous video tutorial, I have covered the topics like array of objects, member functions inside the class, member functions outside the class, and scope resolution. In this video, I will cover the next topic, that is constructors and destructors. Before starting this video tutorial, I will suggest you guys to watch my previous videos related to classes and objects and functions so that you guys can understand this topic better. And I will request you guys to please subscribe and share to my channel. Okay, let's start with this video, constructors and destructors. So first of all, we'll discuss what is the need of constructors. We are doing programs we are doing programs as I have shown you in my previous videos. That is, we can write a program without constructors. Then why we need the constructors now? Okay, so let's start. I have written this program for you guys. So let's have a quick review about this program. I have created a class employee and defined two variables, employee ID and name, inside the private access. And in public access, I have a getData function and showData functions, which is used to read the values from the user and then display these values respectively. To call these functions, I have created the object inside the main functions. So I have created two objects, E1 and E2. Then I have called getData and showData functions for these objects. So first of all, when I did this, I created employee E1. In computer's main memory, an object E1 is created in which EMP ID and name variable blocks are assigned, but they do not have any value. And same for E2, when you created the object E2, it does not have any values. Memory is allotted, but the memory is initially empty. Now when I do this, E1.getData, this function executes and the user is asked to put the values inside these variables. Now let's suppose user put the values 101 and Joe. So these values are assigned to these E1 employee ID and name. So this works fine till now. When we call showData function, then definitely these values will be shown to you. There is no problem. But what if I forgot to call this getData function? Here I have created E2 object, but I have not called E2.showData. I have not called E2.getData. That is, I have not read the values from user. So when I do showData, then since I do not have any values available here, no values will be shown to you. Depending upon the compiler that you guys are using, like TurboC, DevCpp or code blocks, different results might be given to you. Some might produce garbage values, some might set the initial values to 0 or null. Okay, so I will assume here that no values or garbage values are shown to you. Okay, now I have executed this program and this is the output of the program. First I have entered employee ID 101 and then name Joe. So these values are shown here in E1.showData. But when I executed E2 employee E2 object and executed E2.showData, now you see here employee ID is this, which I don't know why this value came, and no name is shown to you. So this is what I'm talking about, that wrong values or invalid values or null values will be shown to you. Okay, you see here unexpected results. This is also called garbage values. To overcome such situations where the user might not give any value, we implement constructors. That is, we forgot to call the input function that we have created, like getData, and in such cases your constructor will do wonders for you and will put some initial values, and instead of showing the garbage values, will show some initial values. Okay, so this is the need of constructors. You need constructor to give initial values. In case you forgot to give the values, then some initial values will be shown to the user at runtime. So let's study about constructors. What are constructors? The first point is they are used to initialize the members of a class, as I explained in the previous slide. Yes, so these are used to initialize the members of a class. Now the thing is, you guys must say that get data function was doing the same thing, but we forgot to call it. What if we create a constructor but forgot to call it? This is the main thing to understand, that constructors need not to be called. They are automatically called as soon as you create an object. This is called implicit calling. There is another way, explicit calling, but I'll explain the implicit calling. That is, constructors are automatically called as soon as you create the objects. Okay. Now the another question arises, why the constructors are automatically called? Can't we do the same thing for getData function? This is because the constructor is of same name as of class name. So as soon as you create the object, it calls the constructor, because constructor have the same name as of class name, and because of that these constructors are called special memory functions. Now another thing is, since you are not calling this function explicitly, it is automatically called when the objects are created, so you cannot pass any return type to constructors, so they do not have any return type, not even void. Okay. Now there are some other features. They cannot be inherited. Inheritance will be covered in the next video probably. Okay. They cannot be static. I think I have covered this topic. If not, I will cover it at some point in these video tutorials. They cannot be virtual. Again, this is the next topic. I will cover it in the pointers or runtime polymorphism. One thing is that constructors must be defined inside the public access of the class. Otherwise, objects won't be able to access them. That is, when you create the constructors must be placed inside the public access and not in the private access, as the objects cannot access the values of private data. Okay. Since just like normal functions, you can pass arguments to your constructors as well, so they can be overloaded. Now the overloading means simply you are creating more than one function constructor inside the class, so this is called overloading. So there are three types of constructor: default constructor, parameterized constructor, and copy constructor. There is one another constructor, dynamic constructor, but it is not of different type, so I will not consider it as a different type of constructor. But yes, there is another topic, dynamic constructors, that I will cover it. So let's start with the default constructor. If you create a constructor and this constructor does not have any arguments, then it is called a default constructor. In some compilers, if you do not create a constructor, the compiler will create it for you. So you don't have to worry about the default constructor. This will be the syntax, that whatever is the class name, you will create the same name function which will be called the constructors, and you do not pass any return type, not even void. And all the initialization must be done inside this constructor. That is, whatever initial values you want to give to your program, you can do it here. So for example, I have created a test class test, and inside the public access I have created the constructor test, in which I am setting the a and b values to 0. So these values, that is these variables, are initialized to 0 using the constructor. This constructor is the default constructor. To call this constructor, what you will do is, inside main function you will simply create your object just like you were doing in the previous programs, and this test t1 will automatically execute this constructor, and object t1 will be initialized with initial values 0 and 1, and not like in the previous slide where a and b was not given any value. Okay, so this is your default constructor. I will write a program in this video where I will cover default constructors, parameterized constructors, copy constructors, and all. Okay, so now let's start with the next constructor, that is parameterized constructor. Just like functions, you can also pass parameters or arguments into your constructor. Such constructors will be called parameterized constructors. Now to call such constructors, you must pass the same number of arguments, as well as the data type must match of the arguments. So this is a syntax and example. Inside your constructor definition, you can pass as many arguments as you like 1, 2, and n. And in the same way, you can initialize the member variables here. So this is this is my example. Inside my test, I am using the same example. Now this constructor changes that inside this constructor arguments, I am passing two data types, int x and int y, and instead of putting a equals to some constant value like 0 or 10, I am passing the variable value, this argument variable here. Okay, now to call such constructors during the object declaration, you must pass two values, two integer values. These integer values can be anything like 5, 6, 10, 20, 30, 500, 700. As soon as you do this, this constructor will be called and your object t2 inside computer's main memory will be initialized with initial values like 10 and 20. Okay, so this is your parameterized constructors. Now let's talk about the copy constructor. A constructor can also be initialized by passing the object as argument. So one object can copy the values of another object using copy constructor. Such constructors are called copy constructors as they copy data. Okay, so to create such constructors, at some point you have to use the address operator. So inside the arguments of your constructor, you will pass the class name as well as object name that will copy the address of the object using the AND operator. Okay, so I'm doing it here. I have created a class test again. AB variables were there, but inside the constructor definition, I have repeated this test. Now this test is the constructor name and this test is the data type. Classes are the user defined data type. So this is the data type and this is the object. Okay, I made a mistake here. I forgot to pass the AND operator here. I will cover it in the video. Okay, and as soon as you create your object t3 and pass t1, this t1 will be passed here in the parameter, and using this t1 you can pass the value. You can pass the values of a and b of t1 to your t3. Okay, so a and b is set the same value as of t1 object. Okay, now before starting dynamic constructor, let's write a program for this. So I am creating a new program to implement the constructors. So I am defining the header files here, iostream, h, using namespace std as I am using developer C. I'll create a class employee. I'll end the class here. And I'll declare two variables, employee ID and name. Now this declaration inside the private access, so I'll define them public and will create a function void get where I'll ask the values from user like enter name and emp id, name, emp id, and when create a show function, I'll display these values, cout name equals to name and employee ID equals to. Now I will define the main function here. We'll create the object and we'll call these functions. Right now we are not implementing any constructor here, just writing a program. Here you go, this is your simple program I am creating and putting the values. Now what if I forget to pass this value? I create object e2 and I don't call the e1 object. Now you see some garbage values are shown to you. Okay, so to avoid this thing, I will create a constructor now. Constructor must be defined inside the public access. So my class name is employee. The same name will be used for constructors, and I'll set name equals to no name and emp id equals to 101. Let's see. And I call okay. Oh, I have to use string copy function here. strcpy name comma no name, and I have to call the header file Now you see, if I forget to call the values, no name and 1 is initialized because of this. So I'll write a message here, cout. Okay, and what if I remember to call this value? Let's see what happens then. I'm creating two objects here. One object is calling the get function, but another is not calling. So let's see what happens now. Now, as soon as this line executes, like 30th line, employee E1, this constructor is called 13th line and their values are set. But as in the next line, I'm calling the get function, so this get function executes and can ask the values from here. So I'll say Joe and 1001. So you see here, name Joe and 1001 is called. So if you call the constructor as well as the input function get, then there is no harm, just these values will be overridden by the values that you pass here. So there is no disadvantage of creating a constructor in your program. And if you forgot to call the value, constructor value, if you forget to call the get function, then this constructor will give you some initial values like no name and 1. So this is a constructor, simple constructor for you guys, that is a default constructor. Okay. Now let's create another constructor like parameterized constructor. So what I can do is I can create an employee and will pass int x comma char n and cout will pass the message like parameterized constructor. Sorry for that misspelling. And what I'll do is I'll say emp id equals to x and name equals to n. And now I will remove this thing. So this will call the first default constructor and this will call the second constructor. So I'll pass 1002 and I will say do. Let's see if it works. Okay, I have to use the strcpy here again here because cannot copy the string values just using equal to it. Okay, now there's a problem. Okay, just a second. I have to do this thing. Okay, it works now, and you see, like first time I'm not passing any value, so first constructor, default constructor is called, and next time I'm passing two values. These values are passed here, so 102 is here and do is here, and parameterized constructor is called and these values are set. And when I call this show functions, so these values are shown to me. Okay, so let's continue with another constructor, that is parameterized copy constructor. So I'll say employee and I will repeat this object name and pass the value e2. My time, so I'll say instead of parameterize I'll say copy constructor called, and I'm not using the get function now, so I'll remove this thing. And here now you cannot pass x directly because I'm not passing any x here. What I can do is I can say e2 dot emp id and here I can say e2 dot works. I'm not sure about that. And I'll create a third constructor here, object here, employee e3, and I'll say e3 dot. I have to pass the object which I want to copy, so I'll say e2. Let's hope it works. Yeah, it works. So third copy constructor is also called, and whatever values of object 2 was this copy to the object 3. Okay, you can pass any object here, like you can say e1. Now it will call the copy the values of e1 like no name and 1. Okay, so you must pass an object value here. This object name matters this object name doesn't matter, as it just act as a placeholder, and whatever values you pass from here will be copied to E3. So this is your copy constructor program. Now let's talk about the dynamic constructors. So I have to go back to my slides. So there you go. What are dynamic constructors? In C language, we know about dynamic memory management, which used malloc, calloc, free, realloc methods. In C++, we have new and delete operators to do the same task. So using new operator, I can pass the values to my constructor variables. Okay. So just instead of straight away passing p is equals to new int, p is equals to 10 or x equals to 10, I can pass any value from here. Okay. So first of all, let's do this thing as I have seen done here. You see AB variables are there, but instead of straight away passing a equals to int x, I am using the new operator and then passing the values. Okay, so let's try to do that and execute that program. I'll create a new program, and this will be program to implement the dynamic constructors. I will use only one variable. I'll save some my time, so I am using just emp id, and I will use only one constructor. So here I'll remove this thing and I'll say dynamic constructors called. I do not need this line now, as well as this line. And here, before doing this, I'll say emp id equals to new int. This is a dynamic initialization. And I have to put a space here, and here I have to use this star operator. Let's see if it works perfectly. I can pass any value here. I can say 10, and I'll only use the first two lines. Let's see if it works. Just a second. Int star to new int conversion. Okay, sorry for that. I have to declare a pointer variable here. Let's see if it works now. Yeah. Keys. Oh, the value is not passed here. Let me check what is the problem. Employee E1 dynamic constructor is called. It was executed, right? Yeah, dynamic constructor is called, but why it is not putting the reading the value directly? Okay. If I do this, let's see what happens. Okay, int star conversion, emp id, and will it work? So I'll say star emp id. I think it should work. Why it is showing me the garbage value? Okay, just a second. Let me see if it works. Yeah, there was a mistake in my show function, so now it works perfectly. So this is your dynamic constructors. Now let's start with the slides. So we know about constructors, that constructors are used to initialize the members of a class and they allocate memory to your class data. But what about removing this space that is allocated to your program? That is, constructors were used to create memory for your class objects or class variables. Now once you execute your programs and the program ends, this memory must be freed up. To free these memories, we have destructors. Actually, I think C++ automatically does that for you, but you can create your own destructor and do this for yourself. So they are used to free the memory space used by the object variables. Unlike constructors, destructors must be preceded by a tilde sign. Okay, you can find this symbol alongside your numerical keys 1 2 3 4, below escape and above tab key. Okay, so the constructors were called when the objects were created, but the destructors are called at 3 times. Either the block ends where the object was created, or your program finishes the execution, or you call the delete operator. So the destructors can be called in 3 situations. Unlike constructors, we were creating 3 different types of constructors: dynamic, copy constructor, default constructor, parameterized constructor. Because you can pass the constructors to your you can pass the arguments to your constructor. So for that, but in destructors you cannot pass the arguments, so you cannot overload your destructors. In one class there is only one destructor that is enough to delete all the memory for the objects. Uh, and as I have told you, if we do not create your constructor, then C++ compiler creates one for us. They can be virtual, and it is a preferred way to create a virtual destructors in case of inheritance, but I will cover this thing later, so I will implement virtual destructors at that time. So to create a destructor, what you have to do is you just have to pass this tilde sign. The destructor will be created. Now let's write a program for this as well. And what I'll do is I will use a count variable, and every time the object is created I will increment my count variable by 1, and every time the destructor is called I will decrement the count variable by 1. Okay, so I'll save some of my time. I'll copy the code, and instead of employee I'll make it easier for test, and I will use a count variable which will be static, that is automatically incremented or decremented. And in constructor like test, I'll say constructor called and object created count. In this I will increment the value of count by 1, and I will create a destructor now. So I'll proceed with tilde sign, then test. I will say destructor called and the object deleted count, and I'll decrement my value of count by 1. Okay, I don't have to do anything else. Now for static variables I have to do this thing, move the SS outside the class. So I'll do this, and I'll create my constructors here. So I'll say test space t1. Let's see what happens. Destructors.cpp. As you see, constructor called for 1 and destructor called for 1. Now I'll create another object here, test t2 and t3, another constructor t4. Now you see, for t1 this constructor is called and count is incremented by 1. Then I place another block inside the main function, and I create 2 objects 2 and 3. So 2 more objects 2 and 3 are created. Then I exit from the block. So at the 26th line, whatever is placed inside this object must be destroyed. So as soon as I do this, after 26th line, the object 3 and 2 are deleted. Okay, and in 27th line I again create an object t4. So another object is created. So constructor called and second object is created. And when I close the program at 28th line, then this t1 and t4 must be destroyed. So these objects are destroyed. So this is your program of constructor and destructors. There is not much use of destructors, but constructors are very frequently used in the programs. So that's it from my video. This will be enough. Please subscribe and share to my channel, and do like this video. Thank you very much for this video. See you in the next video. Cheers.